Yesterday's episode 592 of The Edwards Show, was how to make an info product, courses, ebooks, guides that actually sell. This episode is how I made $210,822 selling a PDF and video on the internet. These two products made $237,207 in sales so far and $210,822 in profit, for an average profit of $24,802 per month. And it's two products: The Good Parts of AWS, a 173-page PDF released on December 25th, 2019, with pre-order since October 3rd, 2019. And Everyone Can Build a Twitter Audience, a 100-minute video released on April 22nd, 2020, with no pre-orders. And this was written September 14th, 2020 by Daniel Vassallo. And this is the second time I'm actually sharing this on the podcast. The last time I shared this was last year in the Warsaw Chopin Airport. I believe that's where it was. I didn't have much time and I recorded it as I was waiting for my flight. And yesterday's episode about how to make an info product that sells, that actually sells, people have been liking that one. Yesterday's episode, people have been liking it, and I'm like, why don't I follow it up with a crowd favorite, which is how I made $210,000 selling a PDF and a video on the internet. Let's continue. The AWS product took about 160 hours to produce, while the Twitter product only took 16 hours. But in this business, creating the content is generally the easy part. Finding customers is the bigger challenge. I've seen many creators succeed with various approaches, but I'm only familiar with one, and it goes like this. You find something you know really well, and you give everything you know about it for free. You do it on social networks, forums, and wherever people interested in your topic hang around. If you manage to get some attention, you will inevitably start getting questions, and these questions become your market research. You start answering the best way you can, and whatever doesn't fit in a short response becomes an opportunity for an info product. Then, if you choose to do the product, you'll have an audience to promote it to, an audience who already told you it wants to learn more about the topic and that it wants to learn from you specifically. How big should your audience be for this to be viable? I don't know, unfortunately. The fate of your products will depend on many things, but if you have an audience that's asking you questions, I'd say the odds are in your favor. So let's dig into what happened since I put my first info product on the market. First, let's take a look at my audience size. Again, this was written September 14th, 2020, and the products were launched at the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020. So we start with this audience graph. The description is, I had a bit over 12,000 Twitter followers when my first product went on the market. Directly or indirectly, every dollar I made in this business can be attributed to this initial audience. I could have created the same two products before I had an audience, and I'm almost certain I wouldn't have sold any. The initial success brought with it all the future success through testimonials and word of mouth. So let's take a look at how the business grew since that launch. And the business grew a lot. There seems to be a correlation between my audience size and revenue. This relationship is more complex than it seems. New followers seem to bring new sales, but new sales also seem to bring new followers. I don't try to read too much into this relationship, but I can confidently say that having attention is good for this business. And it's not the follower count that matters most, it's how many people know about you and want your perspective. This is not easy to measure, but you'll know when it happens. You keep getting lots of questions. So let's jump into the performance of each product to see if we can learn something useful about how they were marketed. First, the AWS product. By the way, before we talk about that AWS product, I think when this was written, Daniel Vassallo, the author of this, had around 45,000 followers on X. I checked right before recording this. Now he has 184,000 followers. He's kept at it. He's grown quite a bit. I personally find that inspiring. Keep going. All right, let's go to the income for the Good Parts of AWS's AWS product. He says we can see in the graph how there was an initial boost from the launch that lasted for about a month. And you can see that's in the graph. And then sales, and if you're watching on YouTube, I'm showing all these graphs, but it's okay if you're not, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Audible, I'm describing them too. So there was this initial boost from the launch that lasted for about a month, and then sales stabilized at a steady rate. Then there was another boost mid-March, partly because of a reduction in price and partly from a new ad campaign. More on these later. That momentum slowed down since, but it's still chugging along at a reasonable rate. Now let's look at the Twitter product. This launch was very similar to the other product, about $40,000 in its first 2 weeks, $40,000 in revenue in the first 2 weeks. Despite having an audience twice as large, 24,000 followers versus 12,000 followers. However, the Twitter product took off much better after the third week, and it settled at a much stronger, steady rate. That's so interesting. So he's at 184,000 followers now. When he launched his first product, he was only at 12,000 followers. Wow. So he says, here's how both products compare on top of each other. And you see the Twitter audience made a lot more money, and it just kept going up when the AWS product was stagnating. So Daniel, the author, says, I had expected the Twitter product to have a bigger initial spike considering my larger audience at launch. Instead, the launch was almost identical, but its momentum has been significantly stronger compared to my first product. I have some thoughts about what contributed to this dynamic. First, the Twitter product was sold at almost twice the price of the AWS product. Second, in hindsight, I think I set the launch price a bit too high for the Twitter product, which likely dampened the launch spike. In fact, after 3 weeks, I reduced the base price by $10, and that appeared to have untapped a large pool of demand that was likely reluctant to purchase at the original price. Take a look at how the average sale price changed over time below and how it affected the sales volume. So he started selling the AWS product for $25, increased it to $30, and then brought it down to $22, looks like. Started selling the Twitter product at $65, brought it all the way down, ended up bringing it all the way down, first to $55, and then looks like $32, something like that. So the author says, for now, ignore these two big drops in the chart. We'll analyze that experiment later on. This chart shows my attempts at tweaking prices over time to try to find new demand. With the AWS product, I started low and went high, then went low again. With the Twitter product, I started high and kept going lower. My general takeaway from all this experimentation is that optimal pricing for consumer products is almost all about psychology, and what seems rational might not be very effective. Let me explain. In theory, the best way to maximize profits from a digital product is to start with a high price and lower it over time. This is very common with movies. Disney just released Mulan last week for $30. After a few months, it'll likely be on Amazon Video for $15. Then a few months later, you'll be able to rent it for $5. And then a year or two later, you'll be able to find it for free on Netflix. I tried to follow a similar approach with my second product, but I misjudged the psychological aspect. Basically, it's tough to get $100 from your most loyal fans and then go promote the same product at $50 a few weeks later. If I were to start all over again, I would price the Twitter product between $35 and $45, and I suspect it would have done much better in that range. But even with this knowledge, now I'm reluctant to drop the price drastically because I'd have to promote the price change to the same audience that includes thousands of my most supportive customers who paid the original price. And I think that could be a short-term gain, long-term loss. P.S. Steve Jobs faced this exact problem when he dropped the price of the original iPhone after just 2 months. Actually, I'm going to include his letter in the description for this episode. Steve Jobs' letter when he reduced the price of the iPhone. He had to apologize. Really worthwhile letter. I even made a video about it because it was so interesting. Anyway, the author continues. With my first product, I went the other direction. I took pre-orders at $24, then launched it at $28, and then increased it to $38 after a month. However, the $38 price appeared to meet some resistance, and the product lost some momentum. Then the COVID pandemic hit in mid-March, and I took that as an opportunity and excuse to reduce the price to $15. This resulted in a significant second boost, which helped generate momentum from new word of mouth that has carried on until now. I have no specific advice on pricing. and I only have experience with consumer products. Info products sold to businesses can likely command different prices. However, after 261 days in this business, my inclination is to err on a lower price at launch and make it up in volume. Selling more units at a lower price has highly beneficial side effects, including being easier to do, better reviews, better customer satisfaction, fewer refunds, and most importantly, the multiplicative effects of increased word of mouth. In this business, selling 100 products for $1 each is a lot better than selling one product for $100 because in the first case, you'll potentially get 100 people promoting your product for free. The chart below shows what I think is the opportunity I missed with my Twitter product. And he says about this chart, note how the AWS product sold significantly more units throughout its lifetime, excluding the recent spike, despite my audience being about half the size. Also, based on the engagement I get, I'm convinced that my audience is more interested in Twitter than AWS. My conclusion is that the Twitter product could have sold significantly more units than my first product if I priced it lower, and it would have likely made more profit through larger volumes and increased word of mouth. Okay, now let's look at that extreme spike from last month. This was a result of a tweet where I announced a 1-hour promotion where anyone could get my products for any price they wanted with a $1 minimum. And I'm going to tell you the copy of that tweet. I think it's useful. The tweet says, "Flash sale experiment. For the next 60 minutes, my info products are pay what you want, $1 minimum. The good parts of AWS is originally priced at $35. Everyone can build a Twitter audience, $50. These two products made $217,000 in sales this year. Go see what they look like." And he sells them on Gumroad for a minimum of $1. Then he comments an hour later. He says, "Time's up, but I'm keeping the sale for a few more minutes. In 60 minutes, 970 copies sold for $3,014. Thank you." Oh, wow. And then he left it open. "I'll study the results of this promo after a few days and will share my observations." And somebody commented and said, "I'm having a great morning. To be honest, I tried a full paid order a couple of weeks back, but the payment didn't go through. After that, I moved on. And there were not many tweets from you as well. I couldn't resist myself from trying again with this kind of offer." So he says in this original post now that we're reading from, he says, "This was the result of the tweet where I announced the 1-hour promotion where anyone could get my products for any price they wanted with a $1 minimum. The tweet was seen over 150,000 times and it generated almost $8,000 in revenue from 2,559 sales. This is obviously not something I can do again anytime soon, but it seems like it worked as a one-off promotion. My concern was that this would eat revenue from customers that would have likely bought at full price in the future, and I'm sure there was a bit of that. But the benefits from getting the product in the hands of thousands of new people appears to have countered that downside. Both products continue to sell at their regular rate since the promotion ended. Also, note how the Twitter product sold twice as many units as the AWS product through this promotion, despite getting equal treatment from me. I think this is more evidence that there's significantly more interest in the Twitter topic with my organic reach. Next, we're going to look at another marketing experiment I tried with the AWS product. I started experimenting with paid ads back in January, but I gave up very quickly. First, I couldn't find a reasonable cost per click rate amongst the popular advertising platforms except for Reddit. On Reddit, I was able to show an ad in the r/AWS subreddit for about 50 cents per click. It started quite promising, but after a few days, it was barely breaking even, so I decided to stop. Then when COVID hit, I heard that advertising rates were plummeting, so I decided to give it another go. This time I was able to show my ads for just 10 cents a click, and the initial results were excellent. I kept tweaking things to try to find more availability at higher CPC bids, but eventually the rates became competitive again around mid-June, and I was struggling to break even. If I had more time to invest in paid ads, there's likely more opportunity there, but for now I chose to invest my time elsewhere and I stopped the campaign. The following chart I was watching on a daily basis to assess my ad performance. And it's a chart, daily profit from ads, the good parts of AWS. And it's what he just described. And now we get to the last part of this. So he says, finally, I want to show you some of my top performing sources of direct sales. He made $20,015 from the announcement tweet for his Twitter product. That tweet read, "It's out. Everyone can build a Twitter audience. Credibility, measure of success, Twitter funnel, make people find you, bio, how to tweet, engagement, inspiration, what not to tweet, what not to do, starter strategy. You can watch it now." That tweet made him $20,000. And then he made $16,659 from the announcement tweet for his AWS product. And the announcement tweet for that was the good parts of AWS, now available at Gumroad. Almost everything we know about AWS packed into a short 2-part book. Part 1, the good parts, the default heuristic, DynamoDB, S3, EC2, EC2 autoscaling, Lambda, ELB, CloudFormation, Route 53, SQS, Kinesis. We also added a step-by-step guide on how we get our own web apps running on AWS. Part 2, the Bootstrap guide, starting from scratch, infrastructure as code, automatic deployments, load balancing, scaling, production, custom domains, HTTPS, network security. And actually, he wrote a whole thread on this. We only cover topics we have significant firsthand experience with, and you won't find most of the knowledge we share in the AWS docs. It's been a pleasure writing this book with, and he tags this person, Josh, and it would be an honor for me to have you read it. A few people have asked for a team license. It's now, oh wow, and he added a team license to this, but that was 16 days later. Wow. So that was his announcement tweet for the good parts of AWS. That announcement tweet made $16,500. He made $13,734 from his Reddit ad for the AWS product. The ad was the good parts of AWS, written by 2 ex-AWS engineers with 15 years of combined AWS experience, almost everything we know about AWS packed into a single short ebook. He made $13,000 again from the tweet where he first discounted the base price of Twitter, of his Twitter product by $10. So he said on that tweet, "You get a huge advantage when you have an audience. Instead of buying people's attention, they give it to you. I can show you everything I did when building my Twitter audience from 0 to 30,000 followers. $49 for the next 25 orders. It's usually $79. So that made him $13,500. He got $12,000 from the Gumroad link in his Twitter bio. He got $9,300 from his personal website, which gets almost all of its traffic from his Twitter bio. He has a Gumroad, I guess he just switched out. You can have a main link in your Twitter bio, and then you could have another link in your description. He got almost $9,000 from another tweet mentioning the $10 price discount. The tweet reads, "My Twitter course hit 1,000 customers today. If you want to learn about an approach that works, I show you everything I did to build my Twitter audience from 0 to 30,000 followers. It's $49 for today only, usually it's $79. He made almost $8,000 from the Pay What You Want tweet, which I read, $6,500 from another tweet mentioning the Twitter product. His copy for that is, "You can tweet about anything, but people will only listen if you have credibility. If you want to build an audience, learn from my mistakes so you don't waste any time. The next 50 orders get a small discount." He made $6,300 from the email announcing the release of his Twitter product to 880 people on his list. And lastly, he made $5,000 from a post on Hacker News where he shared some stats from his AWS product launch. And that's it. That is how I made $210,822 selling a PDF and a video on the internet by Daniel Vassallo, written September 14th, 2020. And if you want more on how to make a great info product, check out yesterday's episode 592 of this show, How to Make Info Products That Sell. And that is all for episode 593 of The Edward Show, 593 episodes in a row. Thank you so much for watching. If you watch this on YouTube, and if you listen, going for a walk, doing cooking, doing cleaning, whatever it is, if you listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, thank you so much for listening. You can check out my own info product, Compact Keywords, at compactkeywords.com, and I will talk to you again tomorrow. Bye now.